Hello everybody, welcome back to the Virginia Wine Notebooks YouTube channel where we talk about Virginia wine and we talk about an underrated album from the classic pop / rock era, which I have defined between the years of 1964 and 1999. Disagree with me, or you can debate me if you'd like in the comments. Everybody has their own definition. My personal taste is 64 to 99. So we're going to talk, I'm going to try to make quicker videos. Once again, I think I have a tendency to drone on. I will try to remain focused on both Virginia wine and also focused on the underrated album that I have chosen, that I think is, I try to match the album with the wine, either based on the material that's in the album or the theme of the album or the overall feel of the album, and I think I did an okay job this time. It was kind of tough, so it was a challenge. So this episode we're going to talk about a winery, once again in the Shenandoah Valley, because I live in the Shenandoah Valley. I have been focusing mainly on the Shenandoah Valley. As the weather gets warmer, as we get into the spring and the summer, I plan to focus on other wineries in other parts of the state as I go on my road trips every other month or so. Hopefully, I'm hoping to go into a different part of Virginia and go back to some of the wineries I haven't visited in a while. But right now, I'm concentrating on the Shenandoah Valley because I live so close to these wineries. And this winery, I'm actually a wine club member of, and it's called Wisteria Winery, and the new owners, well, they're not really new anymore, but the original owners of this winery were from Albania, and I believe they retired. Either they moved back to Albania or maybe they moved to a different part of Virginia. They just decided to get out of the winemaking game. So Wisteria was at one time owned by a family from Albania, and I think they bought the winery, I think in 2008 or 2009, somewhere around there. And they ended up selling to the current owners in, I think, 2020, I think, 2020 or 2021. So anyway, nothing against the old owners of Wisteria. Their wines were interesting. They had a red called Carmine, which was the only winery in Virginia that I know of that had a red called Carmine. It was a very unusual, almost a little bit like a Norton-like type grape. I don't believe the new owners are still growing that because I think it's a very complicated grape to grow. But they are offering the usual wines that you would see at a Virginia winery. On the white side of things, they have a Vidal Blanc, they have a Saval, they have a Traminette. Traminette is a very popular wine with people who are just getting into wine. It's got a little bit of a touch of sweetness to it. Some of them do, at least. The one they have at Wisteria has just a very, very minor touch of sweetness. I can drink it. If I can drink it, because I don't like sweet wines, it's good. And they have a Viognier as well, which is also kind of an off-dry. So they've got quite a few off-dries at this particular winery, but I do like them all. For reds, they have a Chambourcin, they have a Norton. I talked about Norton before in a previous video when I talked about Barrel Oak Winery. Wisteria also has a Norton. They have a Petit Verdot, and they have a Cab Franc, of course, and they have one called Artemis. I'm trying to, I've got the light from the camera kind of blinding me in the eye right now, so I'm having a hard time reading my script. So anyway, Artemis is a blend of a couple different varietals. What I have here is something called Cafe Red. 13.2% alcohol, and it's kind of a table red. It's actually very interesting because they used American oak barrels that have espresso beans in them to give it kind of a little bit of a coffee taste. So they're doing some really interesting things with the wines. And again, not to say the old winemakers made wine that was inferior. I thought their wines were good. They were a little different. The new owners are doing some things that are a little more on board with the Virginia scene. They're not experimenting in other types of varietals that the previous owners were doing. So Wisteria is a winery that's in Page County. The Page County is where Luray is, and there's another town south of Luray called Stanley. It's about 7 miles south, and that's where this winery is. And one thing that the new owners kept up that the previous owners had is the fact that you do feel like you're on a farm. There are a lot of barnyard animals. I think they have a couple of sheep, possibly. I'm not sure if they have pigs, but I know they have sheep. And they're behind a fence, but they also have free roaming chickens and free roaming ducks. If you bring your dog, you may want to be cognizant of that, because the dog may want to try to get the chickens or the ducks. So you may want to call the winery ahead of time if you want to bring your dog and be outside, because there could be some dogs who want to go after those birds. But anyway, you do feel like you're really in a working farm, and the vineyards are right there, and you can take a long walk. They've got like a little path that goes through the vineyards, and then it goes down to there's a little creek that's in the back, and it's a great place to stay for a couple of hours, especially in warm weather. You can be outside. They do have an indoor area. They've got an enclosed porch that also serves as their tasting room, and they have a cat. And that always gets a couple bonus points in my book when they have, when the winery has a cat. So it's a very relaxing and very comfortable place to be. They usually have a live band there, and I joined the wine club mainly because they're pretty close to where I live, and I do find myself going there to pick up my wine, and it's a good place just to take a vacation. And if you're coming from Northern Virginia, once again, you probably want to get an Airbnb. You could probably make the drive to Stanley in a day and drive back, but if you've had a couple of glasses of wine, you may not want to take that long drive. And there are plenty of B&Bs and Airbnbs and regular hotels and motels in Page County, Luray. Especially when the warm weather gets here. I should be a spokesperson for the Chamber of Commerce, because I can talk hours about things to do in this town. But this winery should be checked out. Let's see if I forgot anything. Oh, by the way, this Cafe Red is a wine club exclusive. I think you can probably taste it there. If they have an open bottle, they may let you taste it. But I got it as part of my shipment, and they do a lot of Chambourcin. And Chambourcin is a grape that is very popular with again, the younger people, because it's very easy to drink. It's not very sweet. It's very light. You can even chill it. And they have a couple of versions of Chambourcin they do here. So they also offer mulled wine, and they have hard cider as well. And I think they even have some mead. So if you don't want to drink any wine, you can try the mead they have. They have partnered with a nearby meadery to offer a mead, and they also have partnered with a cidery to offer a cider. So it's always nice when a winery offers other options for people who may not like wine. So anyway, I can't recommend them enough. Every time I go to a restaurant in Luray and I see tourists, I always mention this winery if they're wine fans, to check them out, because they're worth checking out. So anyway, I'm not getting paid, by the way, for saying all this. This is all just very totally sincere. It's a great place. So what goes with this wine? Well, because of the rustic nature of this particular winery, and a lot of Virginia wineries are rustic. You're going to be hearing me use that word a lot, because I tend to like those wineries. I've nothing against the really slick places that are have really fancy tasting rooms, and you see a lot of those types of wineries in Northern Virginia, because a lot of those winery owners come from wealth. They have a lot of wealth in their family, but I do like the ones that are a little bit more modest. They have all the amenities as the slick ones do, but you just feel a little more part of the family, so to speak, or part of the whole environment. And again, I have no problem with going to a winery like Rappahannock, which is not far from where I live, or a couple others that are in the Warrenton area I can think of that are like that. And nothing wrong with them, but this album that I've chosen is from 1985, and when you think of the mid-'80s, you usually think about, the acts that were very popular on MTV that particular year. You think about Madonna, you think about Prince, you think about Tears for Fears and Phil Collins, and all these acts that just defined that year. You probably don't think about Dan Fogelberg. Dan Fogelberg was a leftover from the 70s songwriter era. The 70s songwriters like James Taylor and Kenny Loggins, early Kenny Loggins, and even early Billy Joel. The singer-songwriter, and Dan Fogelberg came out of that group. He, of course, had a couple of hits in the early 80s, and this album came out in 1985, and I remember seeing it on the record shelf. It came out in the summer, and this album doesn't really invoke summer. It's called High Country Snows, and he was living in Colorado at the time, so I think that's the Rocky Mountains. Probably not the best time of the year to release this album in the middle of the summer. And I remember seeing it, thinking, that's interesting. They didn't play any of these songs on the radio. However, after Dan Fogelberg passed away, I think he passed away in 2006 or 2007. I think 2007. I went to a used record store, and they had this in the used. They were selling this for $1. And those of us who remember buying albums back then, a lot of record stores, if they couldn't sell all the albums that they had, all the copies that they had, they wanted to clear their shelves. What they would do is they would punch a hole in the cover with a hole punch, and that kind of devalued the album a little bit, so they could sell the album at a budget. So not only was this album a used album, it was an album that was had a cutout of a hole punch, which led me to believe that whoever ended up buying this album probably didn't play it that much, because it was not what 1985 was about. However, that said, even though there were no singles from this album released on the radio, this album, I believe, was really ahead of its time. When I bought this album in 2007 at the used record store, the guy who was working at the used record store, he was like super excited that I bought this. He said, of all the Dan Fogelberg records that I could have bought, including some of his, I think the Age of Innocence, I think, was the big album he had in 1981 that had the songs like the songs that you probably are familiar with if you grew up in the 80s, Leader of the Band, and Same Old Lang Syne, and Run for the Roses. Those were all from that one album called I think that's called The Age of Innocence. I'm not really sure. I don't have that album. But he had a couple albums in the early 80s, in the late 70s as well. So a lot of his earlier albums did have songs that were on the radio. This did not. However, what this did have is it had a really incredible amount of talent in this band that he put together to record this album, and it's bluegrass. It is got a very bluegrass feel to it. Their banjos and their mandolins and their fiddles, and he's a rock artist, but he incorporated all of these instruments, and he was really proud. And he's got some incredibly talented musicians on this. I mean, he's got Ricky Skaggs. You probably heard of him. He's got Russ Kunkel on drums. Jim Buchanan, he's a fiddle player. Chris Hillman, he's famous. Doc Watson. These are all, if you know anything about bluegrass or even country music, you probably recognize those names, especially Ricky Skaggs. And they were all on this album. And if they were playing this album on vinyl, at Wisteria Winery, it would fit really, really well with the atmosphere there, because like I said, it's just, you feel like you're in a folky environment here. So this album is highly underrated, and again, I bought it as a whim. I had never heard anything from this album. I just wanted to support Dan Fogelberg after he passed, and for $1, how can you go wrong? And I actually play this album a lot. The bluegrass music really made a comeback, I think, in the early 2000s because of the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? That brought bluegrass back, and a lot of bands that came out in the 21st century that became really popular had their roots in bluegrass music. So I think he was ahead of his time. Vince Gill is on this as well. We know Vince Gill, Al Perkins. It's just it's chock full of talent, and you will not be disappointed if you like that style of music. If you like Dave Matthews, any of these bluegrass offshoot bands that were popular in 2012 or 2016. I can't think of the name of the band. Something Brothers. Please post in the comments. I kind of checked out of current music. I think in 2000, I just didn't hear anything that I thought was interesting. I just kind of checked out of that. But there is a very popular band that had a song called "I Will Wait for You," and I can't think of who does that song. I've heard that song before, but I can't think of the name of the band who does that. That song that was very big was definitely inspired by the material that's on this album, I think. So this album is a real musician's favorite. And I don't believe it was ever played. When I played it for the first time, even though it was a cutout and it was a used album, I think the previous owner, if they played it, they only played it once because there was not one pop on it, not one scratch on it. The best dollar I ever spent. And I actually bought this on CD as well. They have not remastered it on CD. I think they should remaster it on CD because I think it would sound really great. But it sounds very, very good in vinyl. It's got that warm vinyl feeling that we all like about vinyl. So anyway, I can't, if you can find a copy of this album, High Country Snows, if you happen to be in Luray, there is a used record store in Luray that you might want to check out called Switz Used Records. They may even have that there. So please, or you can do it on Spotify or Pandora. If you like that style of music, and it's going to drive me crazy that I cannot think of the name of that band that had that huge hit that I keep talking about, but I have my computer right here, and I will pull it up. Mumford & Sons. They were not brothers. For some reason I had brothers on my mind. I was thinking it was a brothers band, but Mumford & Sons, who are actually, I think, from Ireland or England, but they definitely sound like they're American. They do Americana music. So anyway, Wisteria Wine, High Country Snows, a great double feature. Please check both of these out. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.